The caretaker's secret. The remote mansion stood in the English countryside, a decaying relic of a bygone era. Its vast, crumbling structure was overrun with ivy, and the once grand facade now showed signs of severe neglect. The eerie atmosphere was amplified by the thick fog that often enveloped the grounds, making the mansion seem even more isolated from the world. Julia, a young and optimistic caretaker in her early 30s, arrived with hopes of making a difference. She was eager to help and bring some life back to the desolate home. Mr. Bentley, the mansion's elderly resident, was wheelchair-bound and frail in appearance. He seemed grateful for Julia's assistance, his demeanor kind and appreciative. Julia's best friend, Claire, visited often, offering support and companionship. However, Claire couldn't shake a growing suspicion about Mr. Bentley's true nature. Despite his outward frailty, something about the old man unsettled her, leaving Claire wary and watchful as Julia settled into her new role. As days turned into nights, Julia began to notice strange occurrences around the mansion. Whispers echoed through the hallways during the dead of night, and shadows seemed to flit just beyond her sight. She dismissed these eerie experiences as tricks of her imagination, attributing them to the old house's drafty, creaky nature. However, Mr. Bentley's behavior soon began to add to her unease. He was often found mumbling in an unknown language, his eyes glazed over as if in a trance. His obsession with the ancient relics scattered throughout the mansion became disturbingly apparent. Mr. Bentley would spend hours staring at these artifacts, sometimes caressing them with a reverence that sent shivers down Julia's spine. Claire, ever the attentive friend, visited Julia regularly. During one visit, Claire couldn't ignore the oddities. She saw the shadows and heard the whispers that Julia had described. Most troubling of all, she witnessed one of Mr. Bentley's bizarre episodes firsthand. Claire shared her growing suspicions with Julia, warning her to be cautious. She urged Julia to consider the possibility that Mr. Bentley was hiding something far more sinister beneath his frail exterior. Julia, caught between her loyalty to her job and her mounting fear, started to question the reality of the situation. The once clear distinction between imagination and reality began to blur, and she knew she had to delve deeper into the mysteries of Berryman House. Driven by Claire's warnings and her own unease, Julia decided to investigate the mansion further. One stormy afternoon, she stumbled upon a hidden door behind a heavy tapestry in the study. With trembling hands, she pushed it open, revealing a secret room filled with ancient artifacts and occult symbols. The air inside was thick and oppressive, carrying a malevolent presence that made her skin crawl. As Julia examined the room, she found old books detailing dark rituals and spells. Her eyes widened in horror as she pieced together the truth. Mr. Bentley was not a frail old man, but a powerful, ancient sorcerer. He had been using dark magic to prolong his life by draining the youth and life force from his caretakers. The relics and symbols were part of his twisted rituals, and she realized she was the next target. Heart-pounding, Julia fled the room and confided in Claire. Together, they devised a desperate plan to escape before Mr. Bentley could complete his ritual. They knew they had to act quickly and stealthily, as the sorcerer would soon realize that his secret had been uncovered. Claire gathered supplies while Julia kept a close watch on Mr. Bentley, whose behavior had grown increasingly erratic and menacing. As night fell, Julia and Claire moved through the darkened mansion, careful to avoid making any noise. They headed toward the front door, but just as they reached it, Mr. Bentley appeared, his eyes burning with an unnatural light. He spoke in the same unknown language, invoking a spell that caused the air to crackle with dark energy. Julia and Claire fought the overwhelming fear threatening to paralyze them, knowing their only chance of survival was to escape the sorcerer's clutches. With a final surge of determination, they pushed past Mr. Bentley, racing into the night, praying they would make it out alive. Julia and Claire found themselves cornered in the grand foyer, Mr. Bentley blocking their path with an eerie, supernatural aura surrounding him. The final confrontation was tense, every second feeling like an eternity. Remembering the dark symbols and rituals from the hidden room, Julia quickly drew a protective sigil on the floor using a piece of chalk she had grabbed earlier. Claire chanted an incantation they had found in one of the ancient books, hoping to disrupt Mr. Bentley's dark magic. Mr. Bentley screamed in rage as the protective barrier formed around the women. The spell began to falter, causing the mansion to tremble. The walls cracked and the ceiling groaned as the structure reacted violently to the broken ritual. Julia and Claire, fueled by adrenaline, knew they had only moments to escape. They dashed toward the door, the ground shaking beneath them as the decaying mansion started to collapse. With debris falling around them, they narrowly avoided being crushed, sprinting through the front door just as the entire structure gave way. They collapsed on the lawn, breathing heavily, watching as Berryman House crumbled into a heap of rubble, burying Mr. Bentley and his dark secrets within. In the aftermath, Julia and Claire vowed to never let the sorcerer's evil be forgotten. They documented everything they had discovered, ensuring that others would be warned about the dangers lurking in places like Berryman House. Their harrowing experience forged an unbreakable bond between them, and they dedicated themselves to preventing anyone else from falling victim to such malevolent forces. The Knitting Circle. The village of Lockwood was a picture-perfect gem nestled in the Scottish Highlands, with cobblestone streets, charming cottages, and a serene lake that mirrored the sky. The tranquility of Lockwood was almost tangible, a stark contrast to the bustling city Tom had left behind. A curious teenager, Tom had recently moved to this quaint village with his family, feeling a mix of excitement and isolation. He yearned to fit in and find his place in this new, tight-knit community. Tom soon befriended Mrs. Macmillan, an elderly neighbor known for her intricate knitting and warm demeanor. She welcomed him with open arms, becoming a comforting presence amidst his loneliness. Mrs. Macmillan introduced Tom to the local knitting circle, a group of elderly women who seemed endlessly kind and inviting. They frequently gifted Tom with beautifully knitted items, each piece more exquisite than the last, making him feel more connected to the village. As weeks passed, Tom's collection of knitted gifts from the circle grew. Yet, an unsettling pattern began to emerge. He noticed that the intricate designs woven into the fabric resembled ancient runes he had once seen in an old book of Scottish folklore. The more he examined them, the more intrigued and uneasy he became. These runes seemed out of place in the otherwise charming patterns, and Tom's curiosity was piqued. Around the same time, whispers of dark rumors began to circulate through Lockwood. Several young people had mysteriously disappeared over the past few months, and fear had started to grip the village. The serene streets now carried an undercurrent of dread, a stark contrast to their previous tranquility. Tom, ever the curious teenager, couldn't help but delve deeper into the mystery. His search for answers led him to Inspector Harris, the local police officer tasked with investigating the disappearances. Inspector Harris was a stern, no-nonsense man with a reputation for being thorough. Tom approached him with his observations about the runic patterns, hoping to find a clue or connection. However, Harris was skeptical of Tom's theories, dismissing them as the overactive imagination of a teenager. Despite the brush-off, Tom's resolve only strengthened. He was convinced that the knitting circle and the strange runes held a key to the mystery of the disappearances. Determined to uncover the truth, he continued his quiet investigation, keeping a wary eye on Mrs. Macmillan and her friends. The quaint village that once seemed like a perfect haven now felt like it was hiding dark secrets just beneath its charming surface. Driven by his mounting suspicion, Tom delved into researching the strange runes. He spent hours in the local library, poring over dusty tomes and ancient manuscripts. It wasn't long before he stumbled upon a chilling discovery. The runes were linked to dark magic and ancient rituals, practices long forbidden and feared. The intricate patterns, far from being mere decorations, were symbols of power and control. With each revelation, Tom's unease grew, and so did his suspicion about the seemingly kind members of the knitting circle. Summoning his courage, Tom decided to confront Mrs. Macmillan. He approached her one afternoon, the autumn sun casting long shadows over her cozy living room. With the collected evidence in hand, he voiced his concerns, pointing out the uncanny resemblance between the runes and the ancient symbols of dark magic. Mrs. Macmillan, ever the picture of calm, listened patiently. But beneath her gentle smile, Tom sensed a dangerous edge. She dismissed his accusations as fanciful, gently chiding him for letting his imagination run wild. However, there was a momentary flicker in her eyes, a subtle threat that sent a shiver down Tom's spine. Undeterred, Tom continued his investigation. One evening, while Mrs. Macmillan was away, he sneaked into her house. In a hidden room beneath the floorboards, he uncovered a trove of dark artifacts, ritualistic candles, ancient texts, and a list of names. Among them were the names of the missing youths. The horrifying truth was now undeniable. The knitting circle was a coven of witches, and the disappearances were sacrifices made for their dark rituals. With concrete evidence in hand, Tom realized the gravity of the danger he was in. The idyllic village of Lockwood was far from the peaceful haven it appeared to be, and the true horror was just beginning to unravel. Tom's worst fears were confirmed. The knitting circle was indeed a coven of witches, using dark magic woven into their knitting to curse and control the villagers. As he frantically searched for a way to expose them, the witches discovered his knowledge. One night, they trapped Tom in Mrs. Macmillan's house, their warm facades falling away to reveal their true, malevolent nature. Chanting in an ancient tongue, they bound him with cursed yarn, preparing him for a ritual sacrifice. As the ritual reached its climax, Tom struggled in vain, his screams echoing through the night. Inspector Harris, following a hunch, arrived at Mrs. Macmillan's house only to find it eerily silent. Inside, he discovered cryptic clues left behind by Tom, including the list of victims and remnants of dark artifacts. Despite the overwhelming evidence, it was too late to save Tom, and without concrete proof, Harris knew it would be nearly impossible to bring the witches to justice. The village of Lockwood remained under the witches' control, the knitting circle continuing their dark practices undisturbed. The quaint village, with its picturesque charm, harbored a sinister secret, and the terror woven into its very fabric persisted, unseen and unchecked. The Library of Souls. The old, Gothic library stood at the heart of the small New England town, its towering spires and dark stone walls casting long shadows over the cobblestone streets. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged paper and leather, and the dim lighting gave the rows of ancient books an eerie glow. Aspen, a college student eager to earn extra money and gain experience, took a part-time job at the library. She was fascinated by the vast collection of rare and ancient books, though their mysterious aura often sent chills down her spine. Mr. Abernathy, the elderly librarian, was a figure of intrigue. His enigmatic presence and cryptic behavior added to the library's unsettling atmosphere. He moved silently through the aisles, disappearing for long periods, leaving Aspen curious and wary. Aspen's mentor, Professor Green, was a knowledgeable and supportive figure in her life. Always ready to help, he became a crucial ally as Aspen began to uncover the dark secrets hidden within the library's ancient walls. Moments of freedom, she learns that the prisoners are literally dragged through the floor until forcefully fit in the book. As days turned into weeks, Aspen began to notice unsettling occurrences in the library. Books moved on their own, seemingly shifting positions when she wasn't looking. At times, she heard faint whispers echoing through the halls, though no one else was around. The most disturbing were the odd noises emanating from the basement, a mix of creaks and hushed voices that sent chills down her spine. These eerie phenomena grew more frequent, making her increasingly uneasy. Mr. Abernathy's behavior only added to her discomfort. He became more secretive, often disappearing for hours without explanation. When he did appear, his gaze seemed to pierce through her, and his cryptic comments left her feeling more confused and anxious. His once intriguing presence now felt ominous, casting a dark shadow over her time at the library. Unable to shake her growing fear, Aspen confided in Professor Green. She detailed the strange occurrences and Mr. Abernathy's odd behavior, hoping he could provide some rational explanation. Professor Green listened patiently, though skepticism was evident in his eyes. Despite his doubts, he agreed to help Aspen investigate, understanding the seriousness of her concerns. Together, they began to delve into the mysteries of the library, combing through its vast collection for any clues that might explain the unsettling events. As they explored, the atmosphere grew more oppressive, and the sense of dread intensified. The once captivating library now felt like a labyrinth of hidden dangers, and Aspen realized they were only scratching the surface of its dark secrets. While investigating the library's labyrinthine aisles, Aspen stumbled upon a hidden, forbidden section concealed behind a false wall. Her heart pounded as she pushed it aside to reveal an ancient door, its wood dark and cracked with age. Inside, the air was cold and musty, and the shelves were filled with books bound in human skin, their pages inscribed with terrifying spells and dark incantations. The horror of her discovery left her breathless, and she could feel an oppressive energy emanating from the tomes. As she explored the forbidden section, Aspen began to piece together Mr. Abernathy's dark secret. The elderly librarian had been trapping the souls of unsuspecting readers within these cursed books, using their life force to gain knowledge and power. Each book contained a soul, and the whispers she had heard were the desperate cries of those imprisoned within the pages. The realization struck her like a thunderbolt, and the library's eerie occurrences now made dreadful sense. Desperation gripped her when she found a book with her own name written on the cover, indicating she was the next target. Fear turned to resolve as she raced to find Professor Green, clutching the damning evidence. She shared her harrowing discovery, and together they devised a plan to escape the curse and expose Mr. Abernathy's sinister deeds. They planned to confront Mr. Abernathy, hoping to destroy the cursed books and free the trapped souls. But time was running out, and the librarian's malevolent presence loomed ever closer. As they prepared for the confrontation, the oppressive weight of the library's dark secrets bore down on them, and Aspen knew that their lives and souls hung in the balance. Aspen and Professor Green gathered their courage and confronted Mr. Abernathy in the heart of the library. The air was thick with tension as they presented the evidence, demanding he stop his dark practices. Mr. Abernathy's eyes gleamed with malevolent amusement, and with a wave of his hand, the cursed books began to tremble. Their attempts to stop him proved futile as the dark magic within the library surged to life. Suddenly, pitch-black tentacles erupted from the pages of the cursed tomes, writhing and reaching for Aspen. Despite their desperate struggle, the tendrils wrapped around her, pulling her inexorably toward the book with her name on it. Professor Green fought valiantly, trying to sever the tentacles with anything he could find, but the dark forces were too powerful. In a final, heart-wrenching moment, Aspen was dragged into the cursed tome, her screams echoing through the library, her fingers bleeding as she tried to clench anything to save her life as the book snapped shut. Her soul joined the others, imprisoned within the pages, adding to Mr. Abernathy's collection of trapped souls. The library's ancient walls seemed to whisper in satisfaction as Mr. Abernathy returned to his dark work, undisturbed. The Gothic structure remained a place of dark secrets, its true horrors hidden behind the guise of dusty books and scholarly pursuits. The small New England town, oblivious to the evil within its midst, continued on, while the Library of Souls claimed yet another victim.